Well, welcome to Training Camp 2022. Training Camp Week is officially upon us. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to FlamesNation Live. It's Pat Steinberg along with you, coming at you from the home studio on this Tuesday, and we're looking ahead to the start of Training Camp 2022. I can't believe that it's finally here on ice on Thursday. Who do we got with us? Kevin in first, Kyle with us as well. Get your questions, get your comments in on the live chat if you're with us live on Facebook right now on Flames Nation Live. If you're joining us after the fact, hello, welcome aboard. Thanks for being with us. And we got lots to talk about and lots to preview as we look ahead to Training Camp 2022 and look back at the Young Stars Classic, which just wrapped up in Penticton, British Columbia. Flames Nation Live brought to you, as always, by our friends at DoorDash, where you can go download the app, create the account, and use the promo code FNLiveDD. Each time you do that, you're going to get yourself 25% off your first order and free delivery. So on your first order, go download the app, create the account, and then use that promo code FNLiveDD. And on your first order, get 25% off and get yourself free delivery. Chris and Dallas also in with us. Matt with our first question. Dallas is tuning in all the way. He's on his way to Grand Prairie from Whitecourt. So be safe if you're driving, Dallas. But thanks for being along with us on Flames Nation Live today. So yes, as I mentioned, it is the start of Training Camp 2022, and my latest is live at flamesnation.ca right now with the 5 questions that need to be answered during this training camp. And we don't have to go through all 5 of them right now, but there are 2 things that I think jump out to me, and it's not like this is really all that different from most training camps, my friends, but I really am fascinated as to how things are going to come together when it comes to forward lines and defense pairings. And I say that because we're talking about so many new faces. So one of the 5 questions for me is, how do these forward groups come together? My first question was, do Huberdeau and Lindholm play together? Is that going to be a forward pairing that we see? Is Huberdeau-Lindholm something that we're going to see a lot of this year? And is it something that maybe we see right off the bat in training camp? That was my first question. And who knows? I mean, I think it makes sense. And I think logically having those 2 guys together makes a ton of sense. But you never know. And Daryl Sutter knows better than we do. And that's part of what training camp is for, to see who ends up working better together. And I just remember, I've heard Daryl say a couple of times now, we need to figure out whether or not Jonathan Huberdeau is an Elias Lindholm player or if he's a Nazem Kadri player. Okay, so that gives me a little bit of pause. I still think, if I'm a betting person, I still think we're going to see Huberdeau-Lindholm play together, and that's something that we'll see right off the start. And maybe it's something that we see early in training camp. Maybe it's something that develops as training camp goes along. But then how do the rest of the forward groups come together? And I, as you see there, I have kind of, I think putting together some forward pairs is really interesting. Huberdeau-Lindholm, Mangiapane Kadri, Coleman Backlund. I think that's a really interesting look. And then you can plug and play some other wingers around that, whether it's Toffoli, whether it's Dubé, whether it's newly signed PTO Sonny Milano. I think there are some opportunities to kind of mix and match there. And the same is true on defense. And I really look at Mackenzie Weegar, because you see there the 3 pairings from last year. Shillington with Tanev, Hanifin Anderson, Zadorov, Goodbranson from last year, right? No 3 pairings in the NHL played more together as a defense unit than Calgary's did last year. All 3 of those pairings from last season were in the top 10 of even strength minutes played across the NHL. No team could say the same thing. There were a couple of teams who had 2 pairings in the top 10, but the Flames are the only team with 3 teams in the top 10. That's pretty significant if you ask me. And now you say goodbye to Goodbranson, say hello to Weegar. Okay, it's body in, body out, right? But Weegar is a clear top 4 defenseman, whereas Eric Goodbranson was very well slotted on the 3rd pairing last year. So does that mean that the D pairings get juggled up a little bit, specifically in the top 4? How does Weegar get himself into the top 4? Does that displace a Shillington? Does that displace somebody else? I'm going to be really interested to see how that plays itself out. So those are kind of the those are kind of the big questions for me when it comes, and two of them anyway. I got 5 of them up at FlamesNation.ca, but those are 2 of the big questions for me when it comes to this year's training camp. Let's jump in on the live chat if you're with us right now on Facebook, where Matt says, standout from young stars would be how drastically they underperformed. Most curious how the top 6 is going to look in the season. How do Milano or Eakin fit on the team? Hoping for Milano and Stone to make the group. Well, Young Stars Classic all wrapped up in Penticton, and yeah, it wasn't the most overwhelming performance from the Flames prospects. They scored 4 goals in 3 games. They lost all 3 games. There were some good individual performances. I liked Cole Schwint. I really liked Connor Zary. I thought that there were some good moments from Walker Dewar and Adam Klapka. I thought Jacob Pelche had his best game in the 3rd and final game on Monday against Winnipeg. So those would be some of my standouts from Young Stars. I don't know if I come away, though, from the Young Stars Classic saying, oh boy, watch out, there's going to be a player that all of a sudden makes his way onto the main roster. I don't know if there's going to be that standout player that we're necessarily watching for or looking for coming into main camp. As for Milano, Eakin, Stone, yeah, I think all 3 guys have got an opportunity to make some noise in training camp. I mean, I think Sonny Milano is a guy that makes a ton of sense for this team to sign if he can show that he can play with some decent players in training camp. And I'm not saying he needs to play on the top line, but if he can show that he can play with Kadri, or if he can play with Backlund, or maybe Lindholm, then I think all of a sudden you've got yourself another option, and there's a potential for him to sign a contract. You know, I'm curious about how a guy like Eakin might fit, just because he's very clearly being brought in for kind of one, like we're talking about a guy that's coming in and is probably going to be slotted as your number 4 center at best. And they have Kevin Rooney here. They have Trevor Lewis here. I'm curious how Eakin fits. I see a much more natural forward fit for Milano, but that's not to say that I don't see a fit for Eakin. But then you throw in a rumored signing of Brett Ritchie. And if you're a guy like Schwint or Pelche or even Adam Ruzicka, who's yet to sign a contract, it seems like it's going to be difficult to crack this roster out of training camp if you're a Flames young player, if you're not an established young player. So I am really curious how those guys fit in. As for Stone on the blue line, Matt, wouldn't be a shocker at all if we end up seeing Stone get signed. I think part of the reason why Stone hasn't signed a deal and is instead on a PTO is because I think the Flames would like to see if a Valimaki or a Mackey or even a Nick Maloche can come in and make some noise in training camp and say, okay, well, I'm here to be on the main roster. And if that's the case, then maybe a guy like Stone doesn't automatically sign that new contract. However, you know, if I'm a betting person again, I think we'll see Stone signed, just because he's such a good fit in that kind of number 7 role and a guy that you can plug in very easily, and you don't have to worry much at all about how much he sits, so on and so forth. As we continue along on the live chat here, it's Flames Nation Live with Steinberg. Kevin says, wouldn't mind seeing Coleman on the first or second line to be that physical presence. You know, what's interesting to me about Coleman is that he's got the ability to fit up and down the lineup. You know, he's one of those players that if you put him in kind of a top line-ish role, I think you're going to be pretty happy with him if you're a Flames player or if you're the Flames. However, I just think if you've got a deep offensive team, and I think the Flames kind of have that right now, or at the very least have the potential of having a deep offensive team. If you're going to be a team with some deep offense and some deep forward lines, I think Coleman is such a good fit on a line with Michael Backlund and kind of that same role, same line that he played in Tampa Bay for those 2 Stanley Cup wins. And I'm not saying that they need to create that Gord, Goodrow, Coleman line again, but I just think Backlund and Coleman played so well together last year and have such a good connection with one another. I'd really like to see more of that this season. But in saying that, Kevin, yeah, I think that you could see Coleman in a lot of different spots this year. Gorav says if they sign all 3 of Milano, Stone, and Ruzicka, I presume they'd have to either execute a trade or put someone on waivers to make room. Is that right, or am I missing something? Yeah, they probably would have to do something waiver-wise. They'd probably have to. If they sign Stone, they definitely would have to put probably 2 defensemen on waivers. You'd probably be looking at both of Connor Mackey and Juuso Välimäki going on waivers if they end up signing Stone. So, and I think Milosh is waiver eligible as well. I'm not 100% sure on that one, but I know for sure Mackey and Välimäki are. So yeah, if they sign Stone, that would absolutely have to happen. They would absolutely have to go the waiver route on the blue line. At forward, might be a little bit easier to make a signing, but they definitely would have to go the waiver route with at least 1 or 2 players if they signed all 3 of those guys. Terry wondering when I put that graphic up why Goodbranson was still on the list. The only reason Goodbranson is on that list, Terry, is because I had that was the pairings from last year. I was showing the pairings from the year before, not this year. So that's why he was on that list. So sorry to confuse you. But if you go read the article, you'll see why Goodbranson was listed there. Chris asks if they don't sign Stone, I'm going to be disappointed. Yeah, I mean, it would be pretty surprising if they didn't sign Michael Stone, just because he has been such a mainstay on this group for the last couple of years, and we know that he's such a good fit if you want to plug him in here and there. And if you have a set top 6 again, if Uyghur, Shillington, Hanifin, Anderson, Tanev, and I'm missing the one, and Zadorov, if those are your 6 in whatever order, in whatever combinations this year, and you don't plug Stone in until there's an injury, but then he steps in and does the same thing that he did last year, then I think you're perfectly fine with that if you're the Calgary Flames. Chris suggests they need to move on from Välimäki. I disagree. I don't think that you move on from a young defenseman so early in his development. And let's not forget that Juuso Välimäki is a player much further behind in development than a lot of guys at his age are because of the seasons that he lost. Remember, he lost the full season with injury, and then the pandemic hit. Like, Juuso's had a rough go the last couple of years when it comes to circumstances. Now, he hasn't helped himself. It hasn't been great for him on the ice, and part of that is absolutely on him. Of course it is. I just don't think a first-round pick from 2017 who's had the circumstances that he's had to deal with, you move on from so quickly. Now, I'm not suggesting that if there's a really, really good trade that you make him untouchable or anything like that. I just think that he's a guy that you still try to develop in your organization, and you still look at it and say, yeah, there's reason to continue moving on in his development path. I don't think it, to me, it doesn't make a ton of sense to move on from a player just for the sake of moving on. You know, he's still got a year on his contract. There's still, like, look, before the injuries hit and before the pandemic hit, Juuso was a pretty high-end prospect. And people were pretty excited about where this guy was going, and he was showing reason to be excited. So I don't think I'm not quite there, Chris. You know, maybe at the end of this year when his contract comes to an end, you know, maybe that's a little bit of a different story. But I just don't think that now is the time that you absolutely have to move on from a player just for the sake of it. You can bury pretty much his entire salary in the American Hockey League this year. So even if he doesn't crack the NHL roster, it's not like he is putting a ton of or any cap constraint on you. No, I'm not quite there. I still think that you try to figure out what happens there and see if there's still something that can be harnessed when it comes to you. So that being said, there's a big year for him. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Kevin says, I think Milano going into training camp with Daryl will help round out his game and might actually make him a much more dangerous player like it did for Johnny Hockey. We shall see. Thomas wonders if Milano can make the team. I think he's got it absolutely as an opportunity to make this team. And I don't think that you sign a player like him to a PTO if you don't think that there's a decent chance that you sign him. Now, he still has to go out and prove a couple of things, but I do think in the end they'll end up signing him to a contract. That would be my guess anyway. Just, you know, knowing the type of player that he is. You know, maybe it ends up being a complete and utter bust and it doesn't work. But He is one of the most interesting players. He's one of the guys that I'll be watching more than anybody in this camp, and he just was announced to be joining camp earlier this week. Last call on the live chat, as Jay says, I'd still like to trade Shillington, put Mackey in the lineup, and sign Stone. I just don't think you have to do that now. I don't think you're in any rush to be trading a defenseman, a top 4 defenseman from last year prior to the season. I think you let it play out, and then if you are in a spot a couple months down the road, into the new year, whatever the case may be, and the Flames look at their roster and say, you know what, we could use another impact winger, another impact forward, then I think that you can be in a situation where you deal from a position of strength. But if it's me, I'm not in the camp that says you should go and be trading a pretty valuable defenseman prior to the start of the season. I think you go into the year with the group that you have, especially the group that you have on defense. And now that Milano is here and there's a potential signing him, I don't think you need to be dealing a defenseman. That's just me, Jay, but I wouldn't be doing that at this stage of the game. That to me is maybe something you explore once you're into the season. And finally from Kevin, he's with me. Toffoli on the top line with Huberdeau and Lindholm would be really interesting. And that's a look I'm really interested in seeing if they end up going that way. Look, maybe Milano finds a way in there. Maybe it's Mangiapane. Maybe it's Dubé. I don't know, but I do think Tyler Toffoli is one of, prior to them signing Milano to a PTO, Toffoli was one of, if not the most interesting player for me going into the season. Just because, remember last year, he wasn't really in a top 6 role. He was in a he kind of straddled top 6, middle 6, second, third line, and we never fully saw what Toffoli could be in kind of a top 6 or top line role. And that was just a byproduct of him coming in so late in the season. Well, this year he's got training camp. This year there is a little bit more of an open door on the wing. I think Toffoli's got a chance to be back to being a 25-goal guy on this team. I'm really interested in seeing what Tyler Toffoli can do this season with the Flames. As we start to wrap things up on Flames Nation Live, brought to you as always by our friends at DoorDash. Download the app, create the account, use the promo code FNLiveDD. If you do that, you're getting 25% off your first order and free delivery. Thank you so much for coming along with us. We are getting close to being back to twice a week on Flames Nation Live. Training camp starts with fitness testing Wednesday and then Thursday on the ice. Be tuned in to Twitter at Fan960 Steinberg. If you're looking for line combinations from day one of training camp, we know they don't always mean anything, but they're always fun. First preseason game is Sunday. Split squad against the Vancouver Canucks in both Calgary and Vancouver. Thank you so much for sticking around with us, for coming by live. If you're watching on demand, thank you very much as well. Enjoy the start of training camp. Enjoy the rest of your week. And be safe. Stay kind to one another. We'll talk to you soon. It's been Flames Nation Live. I'm Pat, brought to you by DoorDash.